Recently, I had the opportunity to sit down with Wes Bos, the king of JavaScript. We talked about how he broke into the industry, his views on Typescript, and his brand new course, Master Gatsby. Learning to code can be stressful and hard, and that's why I was proud to write the book, Breaking the Code, that gives you those 5 essential steps to landing that first software job. Pick up your copy today at Amazon or any other major outlet. So, hey, Wes, how you doing?
Hey, good. I'm doing really good. How about you?
Well, I'm doing great. So one of the things that I'll ask every guest here is when they come on and talk to us, and for people that don't know who you are, even though you have like a large amount of fans, being the king of JavaScript that you are, tell us your origin story. How did you get to where you're doing it now, and how did you start out in coding?
Yeah, so I'm a full stack JavaScript CSS dev, and I create online training courses for people who want to learn how to become better web developers or even just get into web development in general. I've been probably about 20 years. I started very young when I was just a kid, kind of dicking around on the internet, making little websites, and that's sort of how I got into it. I actually made a PlayStation 2 website way back when PlayStation, I think it was like 2000 when PlayStation 2 came out, and I made a little website about it. And it's funny because I spent probably like a year making this website and prepping it and updating it and adding content and stuff like that. And then the PlayStation came out, and I was like, this is not, I don't really like video games. It's not even that good. Like, I kind of just like, I played it and stuff like that, but like I was like so much more involved in the actual building the website for it than I actually cared about the actual console and playing the games. And then from there, I got really involved in the hardcore scene, which is the music. And I'd be building MySpace designs and doing t-shirts and stuff like that, which like I would say like 30% of web developers, that's how they got their start, which is really fun to see because like MySpace was this very like, at the end, it wasn't very punk because there was like big brands on there, but it very much started as this sort of like punk movement of all these bands online, and everyone just figured it out for themselves. Then from there, I went to school. I went for information technology management, which is a business degree focused on tech. They didn't teach me to code there. It was more like management skills and whatnot. So I just sort of kept coding through it. And then by the time I was done school, I had like a big enough like freelance client base that I was working with where I could just jump ship and start working for myself. So working for myself, freelance, writing blog posts all along, started to get really into the YouTube thing. And from there, I was asked to start teaching some weekend courses for this thing called Ladies Learning Code. And Ladies Learning Code, it went great. I really enjoyed teaching. People like the way I explain things. I was like, I actually kind of like this whole teaching thing. And wow, people, it seems to click when I explain how this thing works to them. So that turned into what is now a boot camp, but at the time it was just part-time courses. Right. So I taught the first part-time courses. I taught the first boot camp. And then as I was doing that, I was sort of getting a good idea of like, how do people learn? How do people react? Where do they get lost? And then I started building my own stuff as well at the same time. So now I've got, I don't know, 8 or 10 different courses out there, some of them free, some of them paid. And that's my main thing now is I just make courses and help people learn how to code.
Hey, if you're liking this content, please like it, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications for all of our future great content. For people out there that are just learning how to code, how did you break into freelancing? I get that question almost every day. What do you think one piece of advice is for someone out here?
You just gotta let people know what you do. And the word of mouth is absolutely the top in terms of getting freelance clients and whatnot. So for me, I was building, like I had a significant MySpace a following or like friend base, which is funny because like now it's like you got to have the Twitter followers to get that type of thing. So at the time I was doing that, and I was doing a lot of work for bands. And then as these bands started to grow up, or as these bands would tell their parents, like their parents would say, okay, I have a pool website, I need a website. And like, oh, ask my friend to do it. And that was sort of my moving from music into the real world. And then I went to a lot of like, at the time it was like called tweet ups in Toronto, and tweet ups were these like, you would go to a bar and there was a couple hundred people in the city that had Twitter, and you would just go and have drinks with other people that had Twitter, which sounds so silly.
Weird, right?
Yeah, like now everybody has Twitter and it's very political and there's a lot of stuff on there. But at the time, it was just us techies on it. And it was a really cool time because you got to meet a lot of the people in the tech scene. And then from there, it's just someone refers me. I did a couple websites here and there. You do a really good job. And then it just blows up from there, because like if you're like good and reliable, that's all you need to be to be a good freelancer. And the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, I think reliable and showing up and completing projects is the number one thing that kills freelancers.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All the time. Like I even have it myself. Just like you, like somebody falls through, they blow past the timeline, but they don't tell you, or they don't reply to an email or whatever. And you're like, you got burned by them, and you don't want to use them again. But like, honestly, if it's true for anything in life, like the guy who will fix and like build a bathroom, like if he shows up and does it on time and whatnot, or if it's going to go over, he lets us know, then like, okay, we'll have him back because he's a really good contractor. It's like that with anything in life.
Right. Exactly. So I think that's cool. That's good advice for him. So tell me what another thing when you talked about when you first learning and teaching people, because I teach people to code.
Yeah.
What do you think the main barriers? What kind of barriers do you try to overcome in your online courses to help them so they don't get stuck?
I think probably the biggest barrier is that people get either bored or frustrated because they don't see what the point is. So being bored with something because like you can only like loop over a list of 10 bottles of beer and console log them so many times until you go like, what am I doing here? Like, what is this? How does this relate to, I want to build a web app. Like I want to, like people want to have a specific thing generally when they get into web development, they want to build that. How do these things relate? Right. So with a lot of my stuff, I'll try to both use like fundamentals, like looping, but also like do something fun, make a toy, make a webcam project, have it actually do something. So that's kind of the first thing that I have there. And then the other thing is just like trying not to get too into the weeds too much. So sometimes when I'm teaching something, we'll need to pull upon something we haven't learned yet. And that's kind of weird because like you can't do this thing without having this future learning topic. And that's the thing about learning web development is it's not linear, and videos have to be linear. You start a video 1 and you go into video 2, right? Yeah. Whereas like really, if you think about how you and I learned web development, we're just snatching random stuff from everywhere. And now we have this like ball of information in our head. So like when you hit stuff like that, be like, listen, you can give a little bit of context. This is what it does. We're going to circle back to that. So don't worry too much about what this reduce function does right now. We're going to come back to that in 5 videos from now. And that's really good because it sort of clicks it into the head. Like we use that thing here. And then when we come back to it and actually learn it, someone will say, yes, okay, we used it in that situation. I see what it was used for, rather than just slam, here's this new thing. You're not sure where you'd rather use it.
Yeah, so I see that all the time because a lot of times we're teaching a very simple concept, maybe calling like a controller in our world, MVC. And I'll get a question like, well, so how do I do this asynchronously? And I'm like, let's just call it first, and then we can work about multi-threading later. There's always a whole
there's so much you can open up into something. And that is often like, I often get flack for that. People would be like, hey, what about this? Or what about that? I'm like, we'll learn about that. But I'm not teaching people that yet because it's super overwhelming. And that's what causes people to rage quit.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So how do people take your courses? How do you recommend them taking your courses when they want to break in the industry? I said they're coming to you and they come to me. And so the goal is like, I want a job. I want to be a freelancer. I want to code for a company. How should they use your courses to do that?
That's actually one thing is I don't know, maybe 8 months ago, I launched my very first beginner course. It's called Beginner JavaScript. And before that, I didn't even have beginner material. So a lot of people come to me and I say, like, go to Free Code Camp and then come back when you're done. And because like a lot of my stuff is not 100% beginner targeted. Now that I have my beginner JavaScript course, that's a very good entry. I also have I have a JavaScript 30 course, which is 30 real world projects in 30 days. And every day we do something new. And a lot of people were sending people to that and saying that should be your first intro to JavaScript. And the reality is it's not a good first intro to JavaScript because I assume the basics of JavaScript. So the beginner JavaScript course is like from the ground up all the way up to like intermediate level stuff and whatnot. In terms of like CSS and HTML, I have a couple CSS courses, but they still assume that you know some CSS. So I don't really have a good answer to that yet. I hope to do a beginner CSS course or like not even a beginner CSS course, but like just a CSS course. Like, here's what you need to learn CSS from the beginning all the way up to like the stuff that I do every day.
Right. Okay, cool. And so what should they do? Let's say they come to you. So you're getting people that are kind of like midway through their learning process, probably somewhere like that range.
Yeah, it's all over the place. It's some people that have taken a mishmash of online tutorials or read a couple of books. It's a lot of people who've gone through boot camps and just need to re-solidify that information because like, yeah, okay, I learned it once, but like it's not going to stick. That's actually a question I get all the time is people say, if I take your course, will I get a job? And I was like, no, you can't like that's not really, you can't just like sleep on this magic pillow and then wake up the next day with $100,000 job. You got to put in the work. Right. And part of putting in the work is learning these topics and doing them over and over again. Things like that. So, what was the question again?
I take your course and then like build something else. That's what we recommend people do.
Yeah.
Like take a course and then take that knowledge and then build something else that's unrelated to the course.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and I think the good developers get excited and see that. And that's what's really, I really love to see in a lot of my projects is someone says, I took the course and now I went out and built this thing and it uses all the same fundamentals that you taught us, but it's my own thing and I learned it up and here's the problems that I ran into in my specific use case and how I did it. Or even just like the JavaScript 30 course, I see people all the time, they restyle it because maybe they know a little bit of CSS and they're just learning JavaScript, and part of making it their own and getting that sort of motivation from it is restyling it and relaying it out to make it their own thing. And I really love seeing that because it means like people said, okay, I see what you did here, Wes. Now I'm going to extend the functionality, style it myself. And that means that people are excited about it and go off on their own.
All right, that's cool. So tell us a little about what you're into now. I know you've got something new coming out, and what's currently going on with Wes Bos.
Yeah. So I just released a Gatsby course. It's available at mastergatsby.com. I'll tell you a little bit about what Gatsby is. I think we're going to do a little screen share here in a sec. So there's that. I am super into React. That's kind of my framework of choice. I'm working on re-recording. I have an advanced React and GraphQL course that should be out shortly. I'm working on re-recording that right now. And that's kind of what I'm at right now. I've got some very early, I don't even know if I should be saying this yet, but some very early notes on what a TypeScript course would look like.
Okay.
Because I think I'm at a point now where I've been like watching it, I've been using it, and I think that we're at a point in our industry where it's not going away. It's not a fad. I think that this is going to be a very helpful tool that a lot of JavaScript developers can add to their arsenal.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe TypeScript's just going to kind of take over and be the new way we do it, and be the standard way.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how it's come. And it's funny, you see a lot of like Microsoft devs come out and say like, yes, this is what we need from JavaScript. This is what we've been asking for forever. And it just makes a lot of sense for them to use it right out of the gate.
Yeah. So, and a lot of people always ask me this too, like, what's your tooling of choice? Are you using VS Code? What do you use to code with?
Yeah, I for a long time I was a Sublime Text user. I even
Mhm.
wrote a book about it. And I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, I switched over to VS Code, and I would say I'm a power user of VS Code. So
Okay.
I'm really into the nitty gritty of all the shortcuts and all the features. And there's every time there's a new release, I try to unpack what are the things that apply to me
Right.
as a JavaScript developer. So that is my tooling of choice. I've been using on the browser side. I've been using Firefox for I don't know, probably 2 years, maybe year and a half now. Big fan of Firefox. A lot of their devs got laid off, unfortunately, a couple
Mhm.
couple of months ago. So I'm not sure if that will continue, but I'm sticking on it until it starts to decay, I guess.
Okay. So nice. So, are you thinking about becoming a developer, but you don't know if you can do it? Go to coderfoundry.com/quiz. Our developer quiz will see if you have the chops, what it takes to become a full-time developer. That's coderfoundry.com/quiz.
All right. So Gatsby is a static site generator. They don't even use that verbiage anymore because
Mhm.
it's so much more than that. Gatsby is a framework for building modern websites with React JS. So people always ask, like, what's the difference between React and Gatsby? Well, React is technically a library. And the one thing that React does is you take your data and you put it into your templates, which is JSX. And when your data changes, your templates will update. And that's really all React does. It's really good at doing that.
Mhm.
And what doesn't React do? It doesn't do routing, changing pages. It doesn't do data management. I guess it does do data management in terms of holding state, but it does not care where that data comes from. It has no utilities for loading in that data or holding that data. It doesn't do CSS or serverless functions or progressive images, all that stuff. So Gatsby takes what React has built and builds upon that and adds all these things that you need to build a modern website. So this is my Master Gatsby course. We build a little a website in it called Gatsby or Slick Slices. It's available at gatsby.pizza if you want to check it out. And it just basically, like, I built my own website in Gatsby, and I've built several other websites in Gatsby, and all the stuff that I've learned and used in Gatsby, I've put into this course. So this is my own personal website. It's built in Gatsby, and the kind of the neat thing about it is that it's all like preloaded. It's all dynamically loaded, so it's super fast. It doesn't actually have, like, I guess this is my local host, but if you were to go to wesbos.com, it would be just as fast to be able to watch it, because it doesn't actually go from page to page. It just preloads it all and does what's called push state on the front end for you. So the way that Gatsby works is that you have your source folder. And inside of that, you have really only one important folder, and that is your pages folder. And every single component that you have inside of your pages folder will become a page on Gatsby. So this is my welcome page. You can do all of your SEO stuff, all of your meta tags. That's important for me because I was moving over from WordPress and I had super good SEO. I had lots of people coming to my websites every day from Google, and I wanted to, like, sort of maintain that. And I don't know, I launched it like 6 months ago and I didn't see any drop in that, which was really cool to see.
Mhm.
And then, so that is, like, you can see all the pages that I have right here. These are all the actual pages that are on my website. So that's just like static websites in Gatsby. But then you can also do things like I have my blog here, and you see I have all my blog posts. I'm not going to create a new JS file for 120 blog posts that I have, right? So Gatsby will allow you to, it has this concept of first, what you do is you source your data, meaning that you take your data from wherever it is, whether that's an API. In my case, all of my posts are written in Markdown. Let me show you one right here. This one right here. This is a Markdown file.
Mhm.
And you have your front matter. This is kind of like metadata about it. You have your actual blog post, and then you have any embeds. In this case, it's just a short little YouTube video that I've embedded. And then what you do is you write something that will source the data from your Markdown, or in the case of Master Gatsby, we don't use Markdown. We use what's called a Headless CMS. And a Headless CMS is similar to something like WordPress, where you log in and you create your fields and you update them and you add new pages and you add new content types. But the idea behind a Headless CMS is that it doesn't care how it's displayed on the website. It only cares about puking the data out in an API. In our case, we use one called Sanity, and it will dump out a GraphQL API. And then Gatsby can come in and slurp up all of that data. And I think I can underscore GraphQL. Here we go. I can go to my GraphQL. This is called graphical. This is where you can see all the data. And you can see on the side here, I've got all of these different queries. And I believe I can say all MD, or no, query. Let me bump it up. All MDX. And then for each node, I want to grab the front matter and we'll grab the title. So this is a GraphQL query. And when I run that query, it brings back to me a list of all of my blog posts. So what it's done there is it's taken the data from wherever it lived, and whether it's text files as I have here, whether it's another Markdown API, or whether that's an actual REST API that lives on GitHub or like one of your other websites, and then it ingests it into the single graphical explorer. Then what you do is you can go into your Gatsby node, and you can query all of those. So here we go. I have a function called make posts from MDX. And what it will do is it will query all of my posts, and then it will loop over each of those posts. So post stuff for each. And for each post, it will run this dynamic create page method. Whereas before we were creating just page.js files. In this case, we are dynamically creating them, and you pass it a bunch of information, most importantly being the slug of the actual blog post, as well as what component to render out in React. So here I've got a component called post.js, and if I were to open that up, you'll see that this is now if you're used to WordPress, I don't know if your students are or not, but WordPress will have like a single.php. This is post.js. It's the same idea. This is the template that we use to render out every single blog post on the page. And then we go ahead and query a little bit more information about like the excerpt. You can get a table of contents, the title, the slug. You can format the date, any image, any categories that blog post is in, and of course the actual body of the blog post. Then you just go ahead and start templating it out. Put the variables where you want them to show up. And if I were to add some text here and save it, it will automatically, there we go. It hot reloads it, which means that as you make changes to your development environment, it will automatically update those, whether it's CSS changes or whether it's JavaScript functional changes or whether it's just templating. It will automatically update those on your actual website without you having to go and reload. And that development experience is really, really nice. A lot of the Gatsby development experience is really nice. And it, of course, makes a very fast and performant and accessible website out the door, which is great for your actual visitors to your website. But it also is really nice to work with, and it's super fast, and you don't have to refresh the page, and it knows about all of your styles and whatnot, which is pretty cool. So I, as a developer, like, that's maybe not the most important thing, because like we care about building good websites for our users, but I certainly care a lot about what it's like to work from a standpoint of a developer. So that's kind of like.
So the reason it's fast, just for the people out there that may not know what it is because it's actually just generating static HTML pages from your data.
Yes, exactly. So if you were to go to, let's see if we can take a look here, our public directory. So this is the generated output. And you'll see that like every single blog post, or here, about. That's the about page, and open that up. There's just an index.html file. So it will take all of your pages and generate them into static HTML. It will also do progressive image loading. So you see, watch as I scroll down to these images. You see how they're fading in? It only loads them on demand as they're needed. And it will also generate a whole bunch of different sizes of that image and different formats, and will serve up the best fit for the device and network speed and all that stuff
And that's
based on the
in the
actual
box,
user.
I guess, that just does it automatically for that.
Yeah, well, it's an official plugin called Gatsby Image, but it will, at build time, it will regenerate your images into, like, look at this. This is base 64 representation of it. So this is my chair. But if I were just to visit that URL, that's a very, very tiny. I can't even zoom. That's 300%
Right.
zoom. It's a 20 pixel by 20. It's not even a file. It's just text, a text representation of that image, and that allows you to get that immediate blurry image. And then after it's done downloading the full image, it will fade it in. So you can see it once more really quickly. See how it fades itself in.
Okay, cool. So as you know, that I'm a full stack dev too, and so the way I've been building websites since the late '90s, we always had a database, whether it be a CMS or you have a bunch of data. So if I'm like running Nike, I'm building something for Nike, and they have like millions of content out there. How do you get around, like, we're used to relying on it being dynamic, and we just update the database? How does this thing handle that? I'm sure it does, because I think Nike actually uses Gatsby.
Like, how does it know to make new pages, you mean?
Or just like, what's my workflow process when I want to have like update content? And it's out of development at this point. So I've got some kind of marketing people out there, adding new shoes or whatever.
Yeah. So it needs to run a rebuild every single time that you change something on the website, because at the end of the day, it is just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? So generally the way that it works is that you have some sort of CMS, you log in and you change it, and those CMSs will have what's called a webhook, and they'll ping whatever URL you tell it to and say, hey, this page, these shoes have changed. And then Gatsby, you have a what's called a build process. Netlify is probably the most popular one right now. And Netlify will say, oh, this page changed, and it'll kick off a build and redeploy that the entire build, or Gatsby's getting really good right now, and it knows just what pages have changed with the data. That's kind of one neat thing about Gatsby, is it knows where all of your data is. So it will know which pages to regenerate. It doesn't happen automatically for everything right now. But that is something there. It's called like incremental builds. And they're getting to a spot where it will take seconds just to regenerate and redeploy it, because like that is sort of not necessarily a downside, but it's a different workflow than somebody visits a page, hits the database, it gets the data, it templates it out, it renders it to HTML, then sends it over the wire. By the time you visit a page, it's already being built a week before that.
Does this eliminate things like a lot of problems that we try to face when we're doing like full stack dev with database the traditional way? I'll call it the traditional way, not the new static site generators. Is like we would implement like a Redis cache or something like that and say, oh, I've already been here, I'm just going to pull it out of cache. This kind of eliminates that, because it's just serving up like super light, easy HTML pages.
Yeah, it's just HTML, and you can even go further and cache that HTML on CDNs or on an edge server or something like that. So it definitely does eliminate that. There's other headaches that come up around. Like Gatsby is not going to be for absolutely every website. Like I'll give you an example. Like Nike. Like let's say you wanted to search for shoes that are red in size 12 that are under $50.
Mm-hmm.
If that was Gatsby, you would need to make a page that has all of the shoes that are red in size 12 that are under $50. And then if somebody wants to change it to $55, you got to make a page for that. Like, then all of a sudden you're like, there's no API in Gatsby once you're in the browser. You can't just go and fetch the data in the browser. It has to all be generated beforehand. So if you're thinking about 15 shoe sizes, 5 colors, and maybe 20 price points, that's probably 30,000 pages that need to be generated. And obviously you can't do that. So if that was the case, then you have to do that client side, and you have to sort of step outside of the whole Gatsby ecosystem and talk to your API directly. I show how to do that in my course.
Sure.
I've heard murmurs of Gatsby trying to fix that with a thing called hosted GraphQL. I bet that they'll probably do that at some point.
Right. So it's still like a merging of, like, for some things that like queries or things like that, you're still going to merge the two tech together somehow.
Yeah.
Things.
Like here, I'll give you another example. In the footer of my website here, I've got the latest Syntax podcast. I've got my latest tweets. I've got my Instagram stories and my Instagram posts. So all three of these things are time sensitive, right? Like if new podcast comes out, do I have to rebuild my website? If I tweet, do I have to rebuild the entire every footer of every page? If I post in it, like, that doesn't make sense. So if that's the case, here, let me watch. It's so fast that I can't. There we go. You see how it's loading it in. So in that case, I go into my footer and I simply just load it in. And then once the client loads, I have to go off and fetch that data. Whereas if this was server rendered, I could do without that loading, that split second loading indicator, because it would all have been done on the server, where possibly the internet connection to Instagram and to Twitter is faster than your client's server.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an important distinction, because a lot of times we, as developers, we see tech out there, and sometimes we want to use it for everything. It's like, it's like,
definitely not.
Gatsby all the time, all day long, and so what you have to do as developers, we have to figure out, like, what's this good for? What can it be used? And clearly, it's awesome for generating even like robust content management systems and pre-generating all of these things to make your site fast. But the moment you go to a query, maybe you're going back to your other techniques. I got to hit it from API with JavaScript, or I'm running something server side, calling a controller, or whatever I'm going to do.
Yeah,
That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So where else can people find you?
I am on Twitter. I'm at Wes Bos on Twitter. I'm basically right here. I have a podcast called Syntax, where we talk about web development. That comes out twice a week. I'm on Twitter. I talk a lot about web development, JavaScript, what's new. People always ask, like, how do I stay up to date with what's going on in JavaScript? Like, how do you know about this stuff? And I say, like, listen to the podcast and follow me on Twitter, because that's where I'll put out this information. And then pumpkins and barbecue on my Instagram.
Okay, I like it.
Not super tech related, but I really love catching up with, like, other web developers just in their regular life. So I'm a big fan of that. Okay,
cool, awesome. Well, Wes, I think you've enlightened us on Gatsby. I feel like that your course is going to take off, because I really think Gatsby is one of those things that is coming in the industry that's going to dominate. A lot of other big sites have already started implementing it.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can get some people out to take the Master Gatsby course.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to pump it on your show.
Oh, no problem, man. We want developers out there to learn about all the technology. Even in our boot camp, we're primarily .NET and C#, but they're going to run into these JavaScript things when you work in the industry. I mean, it's just the way it is. I mean, like, the React or Angular, or even they may be pushed onto a Gatsby course, or a Gatsby project, and so they'll need somewhere to go, how does this stuff work? Like, what is this thing? So, like, I think we can help a lot of people do that. So that was our discussion with Wes Bos, the king of JavaScript. So if you're interested in learning more about Gatsby, go to his course at mastergatsby.com. Hey, if you're trying to break into software development for the first time and you need that first software job, consider Coder Foundry as a boot camp to launch you into that first software job. Go to coderfoundry.com to learn more. Good luck and keep coding.